Two nights in 1972, Led Zeppelin took the stage in Switzerland at the height of their Led Zeppelin IV fame, and somehow, no recordings exist. No tapes, no bootlegs, not even a fragment or one of those collectible snippets sold for $100 in the 80s. Nothing. Just weeks earlier, they had finished their tour in Japan, but instead of going home, they kept going. Hong Kong, Thailand, India. A strange detour filled with parties, promotional events, after parties, and even a secret recording session with an orchestra. At the same time, a new album was released, Santana's Caravanserai, a word for travelers on a long journey. And that's exactly what this became, because by the time Led Zeppelin reached Montreux, they were changing. 2 shows, no recordings, and one of the most mysterious gaps in their entire history. It was Tuesday, October 10th, 1972. Led Zeppelin had just played their final show of their last ever visit to Japan. The tour had pushed the band forward. New material, new arrangements, including the live debut of The Song Remains the Same, with lyrics like Sing Out Hare Hare and Sweet Calcutta Rain. Momentum was building. The next step should have been simple, go home. But just days earlier, a strange agenda took place. In the middle of the Japanese tour, all 4 members flew to Hong Kong. 3 days, press conference, meetings, even talks for a concert that never came to be. That would have been something, right? The Bee Gees played there earlier that year. Different band, different vibe. But to be fair, pre-disco Bee Gees, Odessa, 1969. That's a serious record. Led Zeppelin stayed at Hong Kong's Mandarin Hotel, and while they were there, Jimmy Page had something tailor-made, a white suit, inspired by blues legend T-Bone Walker. White fabric was trending in rock and roll, it seemed. Around the same time, John McLaughlin, I think it's McLaughlin, John McLaughlin and the Mahavishnu Orchestra were reshaping the image of the guitarist. Spiritual, electric, a magician. Different sounds, same direction. Page would later wear his white suit on the 1973 US tour. At the time it seemed like just a suit, but looking back, it feels like a shift towards a defining look. So after returning to Japan and finishing the tour, Led Zeppelin didn't go back to the UK. Instead, the journey expanded. Getting to Japan in 1972 was already a long trip, most likely through the Anchorage connection. And I say most likely because I wasn't the tour manager at the time, Richard Cole was, and he handled that. I was about minus 15 years old in 72, born around the time Big Generator came out. So looking at the map, I wonder how much sleep the band actually got on that flight to Japan. Maybe they were already thinking about the track selection for Houses of the Holy. Maybe Robert made fun of Yes's Close to the Edge, singing, I get up, I get down, right as they were told to fasten their seatbelts. But once the Japanese tour ended, they looked around and thought, we're in Asia, might as well enjoy more of it. It was the heat of the moment, telling them what to do. There was no going back to the UK. Instead, Jimmy Page and Robert Plant kept going, like travelers on an ancient route. Bangkok, Thailand. A brief stop, sharply dressed, controlled. Not the chaos you'd expect from a rock band, more like a pause, a moment to breathe and take a good look at success. Jimmy's white suit came with him. Then India, at the time, the city known as Bombay. Almost a year after their first visit, Page and Plant returned with the world at their feet and Stairway to Heaven on their shoulders. At a local club, the Slip Disc, they played an impromptu jam, loose, unscripted, human. But in the middle of it all, tour manager Richard Cole, paying a close eye to the action. Tour manager is a nightmare job. You get to have fun and worry at the same time. Images from that night would surface later in a local publication that November. A rare glimpse into a side of Zeppelin few ever saw. But this trip had a purpose. George Harrison came here in 1968 to record portions of his Wonderwall music soundtrack at EMI Studios. And here's a strange connection. Wonderwall was directed by Joe Massot, who would later be hired and fired to direct Led Zeppelin's film. In 1972, Page and Plant followed Harrison's footsteps. At EMI Bombay, they worked with a local symphony orchestra, recording fascinating and daring versions of Four Sticks and Friends. It wasn't easy. At first, a clash of different worlds, different languages, musical and otherwise, but they made it work. Long before Unleaded, a year before Kashmir was a demo, history was made at EMI Studios. A step into ambitious arrangements, you could even call it progressive, and 1972 remains one of the defining years for prog. At the time though, this was kept away from the public. Two of those recordings in India would later surface on the 2015 deluxe edition of Coda. I covered that in my Making Of series. You can check it out after this. India was a necessary stop, a place to stay before moving on. Like travelers of time and space, they rested at the Caravanserai.
We're one of these sort of bands that goes places to do gigs on the way to go into places that we really want to go to. We've travelled all the way around Hong Kong, Bangkok, Thailand, all sorts of places, and after a few days in any place, we find that the people are always able to be equated to be roughly the same. This is called The Song Remains the Same.
Page and Plant returned to unfinished business back home. Final mixes for Houses of the Holy were still underway. 1972 had been a relentless year. Finding time to finish the album wasn't easy. But you know what's harder? Writing one to begin with. Following up Led Zeppelin IV, that's a challenge only those four could take on. At the same time, booking agents were circling. A UK tour was on the horizon. Promoters across the country wanted Zeppelin. So just like earlier that year, with warm-up shows in Holland and Belgium, they decided to do it again, but somewhere else. 2 dates. Destination, Switzerland, October 28th and 29th. But things had changed. They couldn't return to the Montreux casino. A flare gun burned the place to the ground. So a new old venue was chosen, the Montreux Pavillon. This building already carried rock mythology of its own. Deep Purple moved into the Pavilion to begin recording Machine Head. Basic rhythm tracks for Smoke on the Water were recorded there, before neighbors complained to the police and the band had to move once again. Built in 1906, once a hockey rink, now a concert hall with a disco club on top. For local promoter Claude Nobbs, it was the next chapter, and he hoped concertgoers didn't bring flare guns. And 1972 had already been busy. The Rose Door Festival, with names like Caravan, Captain Beyond, and even The Doors, those troubled and brave Doors, without Jim Morrison. Then the Montreux Jazz Festival, with the likes of Stan Getz, Roland Kirk, Chuck Berry, Magma, Mahavishnu Orchestra, and the man himself, Paul McCartney, and Wings. This place had seen everything. Now, Led Zeppelin arrived. Lake Geneva, the Swiss Alps, a misty mountain hop. That was a bird in the middle of voiceover recording. Yes, I battled the birds as I am trying to record this episode. So Led Zeppelin were photographed holding Gene Vincent records, a quiet nod to the past. Their manager Peter Grant had once looked after Vincent's wild temper on a UK tour in the 60s. Details like that don't happen by accident, and when you're a hardcore Zeppelin fan, you notice. And yeah, you end up making a video about it. This is the making of Montreux 1972. A bit late for that intro, I know. The band got ready for showtime. Robert and his wife Maureen resting before the shows. Jimmy's daughter Scarlett at the airport holding a toy koala. And there's another photograph, same setting, same moment. It points to something. This may have been taken on their way to Montreux. Small moments, human moments. The Jones family together, calm before the show. Who would have guessed that just a few years later, they'd all be back in Montreux in tax exile, with Bonzo recording a drum solo masterpiece. Inside the pavilion, the backdrop was vivid, full of movement. Page wore 2 outfits, and I'm guessing this based on my research and the fact that it made sense to play the first night with something more flashy. So here it goes. Night 1, the white suit, black shirt, a look he would carry into 1973, think Denmark and France. Night 2, the black rose matador jacket with black pants. Robert wore Union Jack trousers, hard to miss, especially for female fans. The setlist followed the tracks they played in Japan, and by all accounts, the performances were incredible. 2 nights, 2 shows, and yet nothing. No tapes, no bootlegs, no recordings. While Led Zeppelin's 1970 and 1971 Montreux concerts exist on killer bootlegs that really make you feel like you're at the show, their final return in 1972 is one of the most fascinating pieces of lost media in the Zeppelin world. These dates often get overlooked, caught between Japan and the UK tour, but they happened. The Swiss experienced Led Zeppelin, the green sparkle kit, the double neck guitar, the great sounding but unreliable Mellotron, and Robert's trousers. The crowd, nearly 8,000 across 2 nights, loved it. And yet, nothing. Because here's the strange part. There are recordings from that same venue. Even a 90-minute Wings tape at the Pavillon, which you can check here on YouTube.
Okay, thanks a lot. Good evening. Hello.
So why can't we enjoy a Led Zeppelin recording at the Pavillon? Most of the band's 1972 shows exist on tape, even the Australia open air ones, all of them available. Montreux 72, a complete blank, and it raises questions. How did the band approach these warm-ups? What was the crowd's reaction to 7 tracks never played there before? Yeah, that's right, they didn't play rock and roll back in 71 for some reason. Page and Plant had just come back from Asia, full of new ideas and stuff they wanted to try out. Did that inspiration reach the stage? Or was Robert's banter in between songs? Did anybody try to use a flare gun only to be stopped by tour manager Richard Cole? With every new Zeppelin discovery, every piece of newfound footage, every tape, the question only gets louder. Who the hell has the Montreux 72 recordings, if they exist at all? The band was big enough. Someone in that crowd had to press record. Someone always did. And yet, nothing has surfaced. Page and Plant would return in 2001, one last time in Montreux, a wonderful and criminally underrated show. I covered that in a separate documentary. Freddie Mercury's statue looks over Lake Geneva, just like the curious case of Led Zeppelin's absent recording. And who played a show right after their October 1972 visit at the Pavillon? You guessed it, Frank Stallone. No, not Frank, but Santana, on their tour for Caravanserai. Like waves within, maybe the missing tape will be found, just in time to see the sun over the hills and far away. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I sure did. And as always, these programs are made possible by my dear patrons. So let's give them a round of applause.